now move on to public comment. If there's any member of the public that would like to make a comment, now is the time.
Okay, very briefly, we sent in our written public comment, but thank you, everybody, for your hard work for drafting and adopting the manure storage facilities ordinance. Thank you. Big improvement. Second, I'm going to ask you to keep working really hard on water quality protections and improvements because we need more. I know the county has the benefit of a lot of already completed data collection and analyses and planning, but still our water quality measures are showing continuing declines in both our groundwater and our surface waters. And sooner rather than later, we need to stop that and start reversing it. That requires a comprehensive approach, a long-term approach. It's a hard thing to do. Nobody individually created the problems. Nobody individually can solve them. We all together have to do our part countywide. I did include an executive summary of a September 2024 report from UW Extension that's looking specifically at some practical and effective interventions for reducing phosphorus loading in surface waters. There's some things in there that St. Croix County could consider doing more of, specifically greater support to the farmer-led conservation councils. It's very effective to have the peer leadership. Also, some practical measures for attempting to expand the adoption of nutrient management plans and making them more performance-focused rather than just meeting numbers on a checklist. Some of it's beyond the scope of the county, but you can certainly ask the legislature to make needed changes too. And then just last, please be really clear and specific with the UW Extension about what would help the county the most in protecting and improving water quality in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak today? Yep, please step up. State your name and generally where you live.
Hi, my name is John Kaler, and I live at 1077 Old Highway 35 with my wife, Ann Deming. And our notes are regarding the Eckhart Bluff development. We're right at that corner of the intersection there, and our list of questions, I believe, were included on the website as an addendum or an extra page. I'm just here to follow up on some of that. A lot of that content is in there on the questions. Just a few that we're looking to highlight is the entrance switched from the northern entrance to the southern entrance, and we're just looking for a little bit more detail on everything that went into that factor between, the cost of it and also the impact that it's going to have on the neighbors and the rural setting that we have there. Just to get a little bit more clarification about that, we still have concerns on the traffic. It's a gravel road, 16-foot, wide, 19-foot wide, and how people get to and from there. And then also the crosswalk that was put in there is at a blind curve where people are going 55 miles per hour right as the turn. So we just still have some concerns about that. And then finally, I know it's been opened up to hunting. It's a very irregular shape. And at the last hearing in December, I think there was mention that there wasn't funding for signage or to delineate where those boundaries are. And as a resident there, I guess I would just be looking for bow hunting or some sort of signage plan for it's a weird shape. That a radius for gun hunting is one thing, but if people don't know where those boundaries are and there's residents nearby, that seems alarming to us. So I'm here just to follow up. I know that there's more steps in this process, but I'm here to tune in. And we attended the meeting in December. That was more of an informal open house, and just looking for more follow-up on that. And I didn't know if our other residents, I don't know if my neighbors on the northern and the southern have been patched in on everything here, but just here to tune in and learn more about that development and any updates that have come through since the meeting in December. We haven't heard too much since then, and I know I'm new to the process, so I don't know how frequently we should be expecting those updates, but I know that the plan did mention a very inclusive focus with the residents that are most highly impacted. And with the new development, we're at the house right at that turn. So thank you for your time. I'm just here to attend and learn more.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Anyone else from the public that would like to speak? Any other public comment today? Seeing none, we'll move on to business item number 1, discussion related to amending the St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan. Real quick, Jason, before you get started. Thank you, Supervisor Counter. Does anyone have any clarifications or questions on the minutes? If not, unless anyone objects, we'll let them stand as approved. All right, those are approved. Thank you. All right, Jason, back to you.
All right. Well, I'd just like to take a few minutes to go over some highlights of the proposed amendment to the county comprehensive plan. And so the full draft of the plan is available on the county website with everything being redlined, and that full plan will be, and that for the public hearing as well. But for this meeting, we got kind of a shorter version. It's about 21 pages long. And one of the changes is the future land use map on that for the county. And that is not something that our staff have done, but the town of Kinnickinnick, we just finished up a new comprehensive plan amendment with them in the last month here. And their future land use, and that is switching to more of a rural residential use instead of a rural agricultural use, and that's what it was in the past. So you'll see that Kinney there is now much more yellow in that, whereas before it would have been more of the green color. Okay, agricultural sales, just thought I'd highlight small farms have increased in that since 1978, 25% to 41% in 2022. So this is all the new ag census data from the 2022 ag census. So this just came out after the comp plan was adopted by the full county board. Mid-sized farms are dropping in numbers from 27 to 10. And large farms have went from 0% up to 7%, and that's based on their income. So if we look at the ag sales, St. Croix County farmers had 255 million worth of ag products, and it was a pretty close to 50-50 split between livestock and animals at 52% and 48% in crop sales. And one thing to point out, since 2007, that's a $110 million increase. So it's almost 50% increase, probably driven by commodity prices and livestock prices. State and national rank, and that we are currently 30 out of 72 in the state for all ag products. If you look at, historically though, and that's kind of consistent. Not really changing that much. Total livestock value, and that we are actually steadily increasing, so there is a trend there. And then total value of crops, greenhouse, nursery, that's kind of fluctuating in that. It had a lower year in that, but then now it's gaining again. As with most occupations, farm wages have also increased from 92 to 2022. Nothing real significant there though. So just kind of big picture, this one. So in 1978, across the 4-county area, there was 1,734 farms. And now in 2022, that's down to 1,192 farms. So that's a pretty significant increase. However, if you also look at, and that the farms over 1,000 acres has consistently increased since 1978. Okay. county comparison, just in general, the number of farms has been dropping in total across the 4 counties. This is another pretty interesting stat here. And that's so the dairy farms in the 4 county area decreased from 2,783 in 1987 just down to 284 in 2022. St. Croix County seeing that dramatic drop in farms too, and so back in 87 we had 671, and now we've only got 74 dairies in St. Croix County. So that was a drop of almost 600. So significant drop in farms. However, in that there is a slight increase in the number of cows that are within the county, as shown by the graph here. And that graph is showing a similar pattern to the amount of production in that by the county as well. So you can kind of see the similar trends. Crop acres in that, this is kind of interesting for the county. Corn acres have actually dropped about 4,300 acres from 2017 to 2022. Hay acres have dropped by almost 20,000 acres though, or 19,000. And soybeans are the one that substantially increased up to about 4,200 acres from what it was. That's still a significant decrease in acres in that. We got roughly 23,000 of corn and hay that's gone. We only added 4. So I'm kind of questioning their numbers, but that is correct, because where'd the other 19,000 acres go? And then farm types and farm income, definitely you're seeing those increases. I talked about the 110 million before, roughly half again as much, so that's shown in that bar graph. Farm operators, kind of consistent trends over the last 20 years. Direct market sales, there is a slight more increase in direct market from 112 farms in 2002 to like 124 in 2022. This would be in that the farmers markets and the community supported agriculture, that kind of stuff. That said though, organic farms are down almost 50% of what they were in 2017, so. One thing that's kind of interesting here, and that's so the amount of irrigation operations within the county, you'll see this it's kind of held steady, and that for 5 years between 2007, 2012, and that then we see a pretty good increase in that of over 10% into 2017, and then now we've seen the largest increase over the last 5 years in the county for irrigation, so that would be over 10% as well. So that was the ag census data in a very fast overview of just highlighting some of the changes. And then I'm going to get into the 2 other topics that the committee had asked us for. And one was to put some provisions or implement some provisions into the comp plan for utility scale energy generation. And so one area that our staff thought that would fit would be underneath the ag chapter, and it's more specifically farmland preservation, that utility scale energy generation or solar shall be sited in areas not considered farmland preservation or prime agricultural land. Now remember that this is a guiding document in that, but it's just trying to take and say that, hey, it'd be preferred by the county to not be within the farmland pres area. There is actually a payment that they would have to pay back if they're taking farmland preservation tax credits, and it's kind of a penalty associated with that as well. Very similar to if you were enrolled in like a CRP program and then you ended up converting the land out of CRP, it's kind of the same thing in that for utility scale solar. And that would be under the goal of preserving farmland, and that within St. Croix County. What does the committee think of that change? Remember, the main farmland preservation for the county, though, is over on the east side, so.
Any comments? Even whether you like it or are good with the way it's written and where it is? Go ahead.
I hate to give up farmland preservation for other things which are going to be permanent for 30 years. Again, feeding our nation is important. I don't know how we can guard against that. But I was mentioning to the guys up here tonight that evidently Xcel Energy listened quite carefully to us at the last meeting when we told them we were not real crazy about having this, because in Baldwin's paper this week, in the transfer of land, 120 acres were sold for the substation at $2.2 or $2.4 million. So they're going ahead, whether we like it or not. It's kind of like, you can say what you like, but we're doing our thing.
Yeah.
And so.
And so this might not apply that much, on that projects that are over 100 megawatts too, but let's say that we get a 99 megawatt project or less, and that this could be used, and that by the committee, to try to, put the area in someplace else, So the projects that we would have control over, we could cite that goal and that objective. So if you don't want it in there and that, we can definitely cut it. I was just trying to take and figure out where it would be best suited in the comp plan for a couple of those provisions.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Rice.
Jason, has this document been reviewed by corporate counsel?
No, and that not yet.
I don't know if it's recommended. I just don't want to put us in a position where we're inviting litigation over this. Adding this.
Yeah, and that it's not creating a rule, and that it's just and that stating a preference, and I believe in that there will be a attorney from the WCA at your next board meeting, and that to kind of explain and that what the legalities are and what the county can and can't do. So
All right,
Yep.
That was the part I was going to chime in about. So the comp plan is not an ordinance. So this isn't a law. So when it says you shall not be cited, it's still a preference. It's not a requirement. It's something that if it's a conditional use or something else, it's a document you can refer back to and says, we really didn't want them here. So maybe we do something different. But it's still not a law. This isn't an ordinance. And as far as the approval process, once you guys sort of wrap up everything you want to do, we'll take it to Corp Council, make sure what you're doing is actually legal, and then we'll bring it back for you guys to vote on.
Okay. So I'm going to skip over the next change just because I'm trying to keep this kind of together. So then also talking about renewable energy, I'll come back to the other one, is underneath the utilities and community facilities goals and objectives and policies. We added a policy and just termed it renewable energy, and then kind of listed out some policy suggestions and that. So encourage small renewable energy systems instead of large utility scale systems. Encourage adequate training of emergency services personnel for responding to renewable energy systems. Ensure adequate financial assurance for decommissioning of renewable energy systems. Encourage owners of large renewable energy systems to follow St. Croix County ordinance and Wisconsin state statute and administrative code requirements. And so if there was a conditional use permit application, again, coming in for a facility less than 100 megawatts, and that whoever was deciding that conditional use could look back here as these policy suggestions and say, yeah, we would like to see this condition, or we'd like to see that condition, so. And that was the only, or the last change that we had for the utility scale energy generation. Is there anything else that the committee would like to add or change? I mean, those are just suggestions. Those are policies, of course.
You got something, Supervisor Connor?
I think for the comp plan, I think it's fine. I mean, if we're looking at enacting a separate ordinance for renewables, then I think this kind of says the blanket goals and objectives like it says. I don't think we need to get into the weeds too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another thing to support other things we're doing, right? So it's kind of just like going along with other things that will be coming up in the near future.
One other thing that we could think of was stormwater, and that around these facilities and that would be in the utilities and community facilities or in the environmental corridor area, and we already had that as goals in there, and that to have proper stormwater capture. So.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Supervisor Connor.
So.
Supervisor Connor.
Sorry.
I like everything that you have here very much. I agree with Jerry about hate to see our best productive farmland go up in being used for alternative energy processes. The one thing that I also though would have concerns over is on some of the impacts of what the off products of some of this stuff is. And I don't know, I don't have the answers to this, but I'm just putting it out there that we do want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves from things like, do these products that they're installing, are they going to leach PFAS? Or, we already have water issues and things that we're trying to remedy, and we're trying to look into all these things. Want to ensure that we're looking and ask the hard questions and make sure that we're considering that when we're doing this, because just looking at what we're dealing with nitrates and all of those types of things, we want to make sure that we're not opening up something else that's another problem for the future.
I can look at, see what we've got underneath the water quality goals and see if we have that covered or not. And if there is something, we can change that before the hearing. So the hearing has been published in that because we have to do it 30 days prior to the actual hearing date. And so that has been published for the February 20th meeting. So we've covered the ag census data and the utility scale energy generation. So now the third topic and final topic for the amendment is the coordination between federal agencies, states, and that are munis, and to achieve policy consistency and resolve conflicts. And so this text that's underlined here underneath the transportation and goals and objectives chapter would be under provide neighborhoods and communities in our county that are efficiently connected with each other and the region, moving people and freight throughout a variety of transportation modal options. And so I know Supervisor Shirley had asked for the coordination. Are you okay with that provision?
Personally, I'd like to see a stronger word than encourage, but encourage seems kind of loosey-goosey. But I know that there are other supervisors not in this committee that were concerned with that language, so I don't know how everybody else feels about that.
I mean, I think the language that people were squirrely about was literally what the, I guess, statute suggested that was passed at the federal level. So I think I'd like to see that again. And I know it's not a requirement, but it does, per federal statute, require them to work with us a little bit if we use what was actually in that statute.
So I'm going to jump ahead just one change here. And so the definition of, or the federal definition of coordination is here. And so that was something that we included. It came from the U.S. Governmental Accountability Office, and that for leading practices in collaboration across government. And that would be underneath the intergovernmental cooperation provisions. So I'll let you read that.
Go ahead.
Never sure when we talk about coordination between federal agencies and state agencies that those two agencies even know we're here, or if they even care if we say anything. I just don't see a lot of interaction with them that's beneficial, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, certain parts of the state and that we do quite a bit with like the DOT and the DNR, you know, but the federal and that usually we're an arm of the state and the state's an arm of the federal, you know, and so it works from top down approach, not the other way up. But this is kind of what we were able to come up with in that for language that might help, you know, create some consistency planning if they're willing to work with the county.
Yeah, again, I kind of go along with Ryan's thought of it too. I'd like to see more teeth in it, but this is probably the best we can do, and it's not a hard, fast, our rule. It's a kind of a hard, fast, we'll try and get along.
Yeah, yep, right. And I know that Robbie and that with Highway and that is okay with these changes. We ran it past him before, and that with the more aggressive, he was worried about the partnerships and the potential grant funding that we would have from the state that it could have potentially affect. So I do have one more change as well on the intergovernmental cooperation. And again, here and that in the policies and action items, and that it's an ongoing action item, and that for the implementation, you know, to try to achieve policy consistency.
How do the other members of the committee feel about changing encourage to require?
I like it because it feels, if you want to scroll up to that definition, Jason, it feels kind of aspirational here. Like, gee, we really wish this would happen. So require is different. What it doesn't say is who will initiate or facilitate that coordination. It's, you know, we're talking about at least 3 entities, if not more. So would we be offering to facilitate this?
So on the federal side, they are required to look at our comp plan. So by looking at our comp plan, if we say require in there, then they're supposed to listen to that. Will they? I don't know, but right, that's what the statute says.
I think I would like to change that to require, make it less volunteer language too, for sure.
Okay, so and I skipped over one, and I didn't mean to in that, but it was very similar to the first one I took and read off, and that so anywhere where we say encourage coordination, you'd like to take and replace that with require coordination?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead, Supervisor Connor.
I wouldn't say no to this, but I guess the thing I would want to do before we physically do this is, again, just bounce it off to make sure that that does not mess up with highway department or, because if there's an issue, then it'd be good to, at a minimum, have something stronger than the word it is now, but if require would give a problem for Robbie or, you know, through highway department or something, I'm open to a suggestion then that's between them.
I know one of Robbie's concern too, when we're requiring collaboration with the local governments, and that you know, he doesn't want, I'll call it one of our towns, I won't name any of them, and that being able to dictate what is being done on county highways, you know, and that within their town, you know. And so if, let's say that we got a lot of growth in County Road A and that needs to go to 4-lane someday, you know, and that he would want to be able to make that call as a county and that not have the towns come up with a comprehensive plan that says that we want no 4-lane roads in our town. you know, and
So could we solve that by changing the word local to county?
Change it to what?
County?
That's the same conversation I had with Robbie too. If we were to strike just the local governments, we could say, if we were to change local to county, I think that would take care of that in all of our spots. So then, because I think we talk about our interaction with local
yeah,
somewhere else in that intergovernmental cooperation section.
we've kind of got it up here in 8 too, you know, so.
Right.
So
So I think that would help if we change that local to county.
Okay,
And I think that would apply to wherever this kind of wording is, right? Obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
And then can you scroll back up to our, to that first part? Transportation, okay. The other part that we were encouraged, I guess, to reuse that word, was to specifically say not only coordinate between the agencies, but specify that when they have federal and state funding.
So only when they have federal or state funding?
I think you just add that onto that sentence there in the transportation, maybe add it to the rest of them too, just the require coordination between federal and state agencies to resolve conflicts, including any projects that have federal or state funding sources.
Okay, I wanted to make sure you weren't limiting it to just projects with federal. Okay. So you're adding an extra sentence on the end, including any projects that have.
with federal or state funding, I got it. Okay.
Anything else on this one? Any other changes on this?
Oh, that's it.
Okay, so we'll see it again for
Public
public hearing in February then,
February
with
20th, yep.
comments from Robbie and Heather.
And we will have a new clean draft, and like I said, the full plan with the red line, and that will be in the public hearing packet, so you can see it actually in the document. So we just didn't want to put the 363 pages in this agenda packet, so.
Go ahead, Supervisor Van
My
Summer.
only concern is with the word requires, that means that we're going to be required to work with them also. I mean, we may not want that. And whereas encourage, you
What
can
live
kind of
for, right?
find your way through. But require means we're going to require it for them, but they're going to require it from us also. And that's fine unless it's a town that wants to take over county roads or change county roads or those kinds of things. And that's my concern about making it that definite and that
I guess that's why the change, we're changing local to county, right? Because, I mean, we're not gonna be modifying a state highway or an interstate without state or federal approval anyway.
Right, although some of the plans that may come down from, let's say, on a state road that we might know better about on the county because we live here, do we want to be required then to acquiesce to their demands? Or would we rather just encourage them and have them encourage us and then work it out?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's state road is a state road, right? Same thing, we don't want towns messing with county roads. The state doesn't want us messing with state roads unless they're contracting us to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I guess
really,
my
they're
point
probably
is
not
I don't
gonna
want to
ask
tie
us-
our hands in any of the transportation.
Yeah.
part. And I'm a little concerned, and maybe Corp Council can straighten it out a bit, but maybe that's not the right word. Maybe we just don't want to tie our own hands behind our back either. And I think that's what Robbie was concerned with before, and I'm just wondering if he won't be concerned with this again.
Might be,
Because,
yeah.
because, they write their own grants, they get their own grants and deal with that. if for certain we need to pass it past him before we say, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, I can send it to him, and we can pull out Webster and see what we can come up with for other words too, if you want.
I mean, and if he says that, the requires okay as long as it's doesn't include the word local, then that's obviously fine too. But we'll just see. We'll just see what he says when he sees it, I guess.
Okay, we'll do.
Any other comments on the comp plan for now? No? All right. Move on to agenda item 2, business item 2, consideration of the St. Croix County UW Extension 2025 work plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So at the direction of the committee, 2 months ago, Tim Stieber and that Land and Water Administrator and myself met with Carrie Weiss and that with UW Extension on January 2nd to help facilitate some common areas in that we could both benefit from and to help be the foundation for creating a work plan for 2025. And so really for the community development side, the crop educator is one position in that would be under our review. And so we came up with 6 different ideas in that person and that which is Becky Brathall could take and help us with. And the first one is a grower meeting where UW Extension could be educating on some of the BMPs or the best management practices, so filter strips, cover crops, no-till or minimal till, and then allow our land and water staff some time to present, and have NRCS and USDA also presenting at that meeting with different programs and fundings available. So that would be for agronomists and producers in that are within the county. We've got quite a bit of funding with the Kinney. We're also going to be probably having some funding in the O'Galley watershed. And so that would be a new way to try to get some interest in the various options. And basically all 3 parties would be there and presenting to kind of cover everything in one, 2 to 3 hour day. I believe that Tim has already worked with Becky and they're looking at putting something together. I think it was March 20th already on that. So that's already kind of started. Then one of the things in that UW Extension has and that our producers within the county might be able to benefit from is nutrient management plan training. And so that would not be one of our current educators. They would bring in an educator that only does that, and our producers could take and be trained on how to do nutrient management plans. And so I do know also in that DATCAP has a grant that will actually take and pay for some of the soil testing and the initial startup of a nutrient management plan. We have not obtained that in the past because we haven't had a CCA on staff to be able to do this training. And also, and that it takes and pays for the training, and that a certain amount if there's a cost that's associated with it. Those grants aren't very big. I'm talking like $10,000 a year, and that is about all that it is. Then they could do something like create a nitrogen smart program. That is one program that Minnesota Extension has currently. So if you wanted to see what that looks like, that may also be called the nitrogen optimization program, which is what Wisconsin's kind of calling it. So it'd be a combination of one or the other, but that would be something they could do, and that would help with nitrates in the water. And but that's probably a multi-year project. And then our water clinics, and they could have a table there and talk about water treatment and about some of the UW Extension water analysis that they've done. So that was an idea that they could participate. Phosphorus stratification, that's another area that they're kind of currently already doing some work on. And I'm definitely not an expert in that area, but something that they offered. And one of the things in that we are currently in the process of is we're trying to do some groundwater modeling and that for the O'Galley and the Kinney watersheds, because we're doing groundwater plans for those areas. And so what we'd like to have is actually a survey of X number of acres in the O'Galley watershed are being cover cropped. X number of acres are no-till. And because right now, it's just kind of pulling a number or percentage out of the sky, and then we're guessing. But if we had an actual, number that's somewhat closer, then we can project out and say, okay, here's how much we want to take and get to, and that to help the water quality in that area. And so that's something that, hopefully could be started sooner than later. So with that, I'll handle each educator at a time. Is that something that the committee agrees with, or is there other areas that you'd rather see them focus on? Just for the crops educator right now, so.
Go ahead, Supervisor Connor.
Yeah, I like the, okay. I like the list and the issues that you're drawing towards. I think it sounds like that's the up and coming and the things that we need to concentrate on and try to forge ahead. As we've now taken on the manure section of things, now looking at these other things, I think is a really good idea. The big thing with all of this, if we develop these classes and stuff, is making sure that we get as many individuals as possible to attend and be part of it, so that we can have as much bang as we can for what we're spending into it.
Go ahead, Supervisor Summer.
Yeah, that looks fine. The thing that I want to make certain that they focus on, actually, in all of these things, is the water quality. It's not just let's do this, but that keeps the water pure, that cleans up our water, that keeps our water clean. And, as you probably expect me to say, I want to see, coming back to us, how many people participate in these, how many people are there. Just maybe a synopsis of what they're doing, because I think it's important for us to understand what even the farmers are getting. None of us are farmers up here, but we know farmers, and we want to know farmers. We want to talk to farmers, and we've had some very interesting conversations with them over this whole manure digesting, manure storage deal, and they've pretty much told us they want to talk with us more, and that's why I think we want to. And maybe if it's up to us to do it, maybe for us to encourage that they attend those kinds of things. Also, so that's why I think the accountability part is that, okay, this is what we did, this is what happened, and then I think the county board would be happier knowing something happened too.
Right. Yeah, I think that first one there, the grower meeting, and that we had a grant for the Willow River watershed, and unfortunately that there wasn't a lot of traction at the beginning of that grant period, and so we ended up turning back some money because we didn't have BMPs, and that could be done with staff turnover and stuff, and so that's where we're trying to get ahead of it, especially with the Kinney grant, which was much larger again. So anyway. And I should back up a little bit too. So Carrie's here tonight, kind of gathering your feedback, and she will be here for the February 20th meeting, and she'll have a more detailed work plan of what this actually might look like in that, but she needs also to get approvals from the Institute on that, or the UW extension system and that for these program tweaks. So I was just going to present the topics, see if it's kind of on track for what you're thinking, and then it will be followed up next month with more detail.
Supervisor Counter and then Supervisor Rice.
Jason, as we're doing this, one of the things I'd like to do, because a lot of this, we're kind of keying in on things that we know that there's issues with. And I guess as we develop these class models and stuff, or the information, I think we should add in some of the stuff, some of the excellent work Tim has done in analysis with, the non-rotation of corn, or all of the things where we're finding these issues. And So use that information to draw the people in so that hopefully we can get more participants and they understand why this is so important to the county as a whole.
My thought here is if we can accomplish this in a year with a quarter of an FTE, that'd be amazing. I agree with Supervisor Van Summeren. We need measurements, whether you call it accountability, evaluations, number of participants, how many people were invited, those kinds of things. I also think it would be, if available, beneficial for county supervisors to attend. If this is open to either the broad public or at least county supervisor, having us there might actually be a draw. We could learn along with everybody else. So that was kind of my thought on that piece of it.
All right, so then moving on to the community development educator, that's a 1 FTE. And underneath that one of the things that Carrie brought up is that they do management and supervisor training. And so the county board approved 1 FTE for a new training staff and that for HR. But this might be something in that they could partner on and do some training for our current staff instead of hiring it from outside. And so I have relayed this option to Audrey with HR and kind of going to leave it in her ballpark and that if that's a priority, but that's something maybe that they could do.
This is also the role that did the I guess the comp plan or whatever for HHS, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And then also county board assistants and priority setting. So in December, and that Allison Sutter and that who is in this role currently was here, and we did the dot democracy in that with the priorities of the county board. And so just leaving it kind of general like that, but a third party on that can come in and help the board instead of directly for staff if it's a controversial issue, for example. And then what they're doing a lot currently is nonprofit boards and the leadership and the finance of those boards. That's something that there's currently in their programming. It might not directly help the county. It's just whether or not the policymakers feel that that's important enough to put it in their work plan, or if there's other things that you'd like to see.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Looking back at the crops educator and even the community development, we're focusing on the Ogallala River, the Kennebec watersheds. That's all south of here, but we know, and we have guests here that will tell us that if we ask, that north of Hudson, there are some issues too that we have to deal with. Is there a way of I'm not sure what kind of education. There are some farmers up there, yes. There's probably more golf courses up there and more people who put way too much fertilizer on their lawns up there.
The Willow River has a 182,000 acre watershed and it's dominated by ag land uses.
Okay, there it is. Okay. When I think of north of Hudson, I think of not much ag land, but a lot of nothing. You know, I shouldn't say nothing, but not a lot of less productive. But I think we ought to also, if we're going to do that, we ought to do something in that area. That area already shows signs of being weary. That can clean that up, can spruce that up, can pick that up, can give it hope.
I can tell you the reason why we're in the Ogallala and the Kinney watershed right now is because that's where the funding is, and so that's, exclusively why it's there. So the Ogallala watershed's in a partnership in that with Dunn and Pierce County as well, and it's doing the groundwater plan. That's part of a USDA grant, so we got, and that's some staff time and that to help with that. And hopefully once that plan is done, then that'll release some potential USDA funds to actually put in soft and hard practices within that watershed to improve it. The Willow, we just wrapped up in 2024 here, and don't quote me on this, but I think we left about 112,000 on the table just because we couldn't get enough cost share in that and projects out there. So that was a 3-year grant, so we would have got that grant at the start of 2021. And so eventually it might come back around to that watershed, but that's the reason why it's not the Willow right now. But yet at the same time, staff had an all-time high year as far as cost share, and that we did over 400,000 and almost $600,000 worth of total projects in that, within the county. And so there was a lot going on in the Will. It was a very strong finish to that. And that it's just in the first couple of years in that they didn't spend any money. They didn't have any projects, and there was a lot of staff turnover. So that's kind of the reason why it's down there. Of course, we're not limited just to that area. We do other cost shares in that with the counties, 30 grand, and that is in there for around the whole county. But that's why those two watersheds are a main focus right now.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Connor.
Yeah, as that thing rolls around again, if the Willow River one comes in, one of the other places to maybe talk to people is like Lakeside Foods, who rents a tremendous volume of land for vegetable crops that they use at the cannery in Richmond, and operations for them, and how they're, how are they dealing with their nutrition plans and some of those things. Might be a place to start anyway, because they put up a tremendous amount of acreage.
They do, yep. All right, so what do you think about the community development educator area for the work plan?
Go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I guess I'd be interested to hear maybe from Carrie what other options we have for that educator. When I hear community development educator, it's what are they going to educate either our department or what's going to drive development. So I don't know what else. It seems like a small list right now is what I'm trying to get to. For a full FTE, we should expand that, I think.
Yeah, and what I'm looking for on these, which the last one I don't think meets, is how is it benefiting the county as an organization? I mean, they may go out and do nonprofit leadership training in the community, and that's helping people in the community. But what we were looking at is where our work plans can blend together. So I don't know if Carrie wanted to talk to Supervisor Shirley's point about what other options might be. I don't know if you have any off the top of your head, but come up to the microphone and then say no.
Just real quickly, too, it's actually a 0.5. We share that position with Polk County. So she is part-time at current, a 50% staffer. But additionally, some of the things that she also offers is a lot of strategic planning, also foresight planning, and that's a new thing. And so some sort of technical assistance like that can also be afforded. Process work like that is something that is typically done with this position, and that sort of ties in that community development. How do we help communities develop where they want to go with these various processes that she can offer out? Likewise, then the nonprofit, she does leadership training for them, but that's where it can also come to the county. And that leadership program can, it consists of things such as board development, finance sort of development and growth, et cetera, networking, how to build your resources and so forth. So there's quite a bit of energy there, and we're looking to grow that partnership with the St. Croix Valley Foundation too.
Maybe this is, I don't know, unnecessary, but I'm going to throw a bomb in real quick. Or a small grenade, at least. So we are looking at, and obviously we have this great start on this gorgeous new addition and the remodel here, but we're looking at a pretty large jail remodel and expansion. And I don't know, this might be a question for Ken too, or maybe the sheriff even. Would it be worth having this position look at modeling out our jail population to see what we need and when?
Yeah, the sheriff had a jail study done that I think did that. He'd presented that at the public safety last year sometime. So, I mean, the idea is correct, but I think we have done that already.
Go ahead, Supervisor Rice.
Yeah, I just want to put in a plug. If there's an opportunity to add the Willow River watershed into this, there's such a great demand for, and I know Tim's aware of it as well. So.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess I'm not real convinced we need a lot of nonprofit leadership finance training. I'm not sure. Not sure about that one. Usually nonprofits don't do a whole lot with finance. I mean, they find ways of getting around a lot of things.
So Supervisor Van Summer, would you like to strike that one and add in more of the strategic planning and foresight planning
I think
the
I would.
county?
Yeah, I think I would
Or-
rather, something that really benefits the county, which benefits a greater amount of people than just the nonprofit group.
Yeah, and again, their educators do things in the community besides what's on this list. This isn't the only things they're going to do. They do other things in
Right.
the community.
This is like the priority list here.
Well, and not even the priority list. It's the list of things that interact with the county.
Oh, sure,
So
yeah.
how can the county save resources by partnering with UW Extension? That was what we were looking at.
Yeah.
To say, well, if we're going to pay for all of this, is there savings that the county is realizing because we're using some of the UW Extension educators? So where do those blend together?
Yeah, I
So
think-
yes, continue doing whatever it is that you want to do in the county, but just know that you don't get as much credit for that stuff.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This strategic, long-term planning stuff is pretty valuable. Any other thoughts from, on this one?
Okay. And then 4-H educator would remain the same, so.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, go ahead.
My question on the 4-H is we heard a lot towards the end as we were wrapping up the 25 budget on extension that it was more than just the one FTE that participated in 4-H. So where's the other, who else is helping with 4-H, I guess is my question.
Yeah, there's the 4-H educator, which is currently vacant still. Oh, they just hired somebody. All right. So there's that position. There's the administrative assistant position for UW Extension, who spends a significant amount of time supporting 4-H, and it was like 50% of her position that was supporting 4-H. And then they have basically a summer intern position, which is a half FTE. There is $20,000 budgeted for that supports 4-H. So really probably about 2.0 FTEs total between those three people.
This looks like a good plan. I would suggest that those additional resources, which are essential as well, should somehow be included in this document. I don't know if our plan is, I think you were talking about having Carrie come to the full county board next month. So let's make sure we, include those resources as well.
Yeah, we also need to get the HHS ones added. So UW Extension's Committee of Jurisdiction is this committee. So I just haven't gotten those details yet from Bob or from Carrie about what that looks like, but that should be on the same work plan that you guys are approving.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to throw you off by the one FTE or the quarter FTE. I was just trying to show proportional. So, okay.
Nothing else on this one. I think we can move to discussion on Eckerd Blufflands Master Plan Amendment. Thank you, Carrie, for coming.
All right. So, as discussed in that previously, when the county board was talking about the funding for Eckerd Blufflands in 2025, we said in that we would amend the master plan because in order to obtain grant funding, it's very important that our master plan at least includes whatever we're going to be applying for grants on. Small stuff or stuff that we're not going to be using grant funding doesn't necessarily have to be in the master plan, but, you know, can be if you can think that far ahead and know what you're expecting. So the current master plan was adopted in 2022. The objectives in that of preparing the amended master plan was to emphasize that passive recreational uses and that such as hiking, biking, play areas, picnic areas, and nature viewing. And that to prepare a plan with lower development cost and that will align with the more modest development strategy for the property, and then involve the town, the neighbors, and any other officials that might be needed, and that to make sure that we're complying as much as possible with everybody's ordinances and requirements and move forward that way. The master plan originally was 14.8 million, and that was estimated. If we reflect some inflation cost in that since 2022, we're probably looking at well over 18 million, or potentially even higher of that. And so the idea was to reduce that overall scope. The amended master plan, and you've got a sheet that we handed out. So there was an open house that we held with the adjoining property owners. So we sent them an actual invite to 45 people, and what we sent it to and how we determined where we stopped was we used our general public hearing notice procedure, which is 300 feet from the exterior boundaries of the property, and so that's where we get hit roughly 45 homes. And so about 25 people showed up in that for that open house, and but that's just some background. The new plan reflects a new entrance onto Highway 35, and that because of the old plan had a north entrance, and there's a very significant grade going up to the new Highway 35 from the park property there. There was also concerns about having enough staging area with that plan. There was a lot more traffic volume and traffic flow. And so that's kind of how that plan was created. Back in February, when I approached the town of St. Joe, they weren't really sold on vacating that northern chunk. And then in May, we went to the town of Hudson board meeting, and they took and made a motion, and that supporting the improvement of the south end of Old 35 to access the park. And with that, and that they would be in support of us improving that access from Old 35 onto New 35. And so Robbie with Highway is already in communications in that with the DOT on what that access will really look like and entail for moving forward. And then the old Highway 35 would be improved, with pavement and up to town road specs and that going into the park on the existing private road there that comes out. The old plan had 13 hike-in sites. Those were more on the north end of the property. Those are not reflected in the new plan. It also had 7 yurts, and those were mainly on the southern part of the property, and 18 camper cabins. And of course, when you have that kind of density of cabins and yurts and that, then you need to have parking and that for vehicles and the road improvements that go along with it. So there's 6 off-street parking areas in that, whereas now that's really down to 1 larger parking area, more centrally placed within the middle of the park. The old plan had an entrance station, a sledding hill, a mountain bicycle training course, a ropes adventure playground. That is all removed. The entrance station is more of a gate system in the new plan. The sledding hill, I think we're going to probably end up using for fill material for the actual construction of the road and stuff going back in there, and that would probably be a future maintenance garage in that for our equipment. And then mountain biking, and that is more up on that north end, and that where those 13 hike-in sites were. And then as far as playgrounds and stuff, that's still yet to be determined, but we do have a little bit of room for playground in the new plan. I pretty much went through, so the new plan, and I'll kind of jump down, well, I can't quite. But the first initial parking lot area, we're looking at 130 by 230 feet, which should accommodate between 80 and 100 parking stalls. And the access to all the properties back within the park, they will maintain their access down the existing private road going into the park. And that one thing nice in that, and when we talked to the county board about putting in all of our heavy dirt work, the road, the parking lot and everything, is that we can take and put in adequate stormwater facilities at the same time so that we're not piecemealing the stormwater in. And then several, picnic shelters and cooking grills and stuff are still included in the new plan. The new plan also has what we're calling corridor trails, and that's the blue map, the blue trail, and also on that the red trail here. And the idea with both of those trails is that those would be 8 to 10 feet wide. The blue trail is capable of being ADA accessible with the terrain and the grades the way it is out there. The red trail, not so much. However, we would still maintain the 8 to 10 foot width on that trail for two reasons. In that, for dual traffic going both ways in that, hikers and bikers, whatever it might be. Also, those are more of our emergency management corridors in that, to be able to get a UTV or even an ambulance around to various parts of the park so that we're able to do it with that. So that would be our, I'll call it emergency management corridor trail as well. When looking at, I wish I could expand this image, but it doesn't look like it. But there is kind of a point here that would be part of the first phase. It's very level walking out there, so that would even be ADA accessible. It's got a great view of the river and the new bridge and that on Highway 64. Eventually, a small pavilion with a couple picnic tables could be built there and still meet all of the zoning requirements of the St. Croix River. This area up in here has a lot of terrain and has got a lot of challenges. So that's where maybe some mountain bike trails that are very narrow, talking 2 feet in width, and that could be constructed. We've been actually talking with some volunteer groups and that are interested in constructing some of these trails. And so that might be sooner than later if the committee is supportive of that concept. Then within this area here, there is quite a bit of terrain too, but it's not nearly as bad as that northern chunk. And so the idea might be to take and have some smaller loops of trails for mountain biking and hiking inside or around those corridor trails. And again, the volunteer groups seem like they may be favoritism to that too, or they may be willing to do it. And then the top area here, little pink area, that would be the playground and the pavilion right below it. So on the sheet that I handed out, there's a map on the backside there, so you're able to see that. One of the benefits about having that laid out that way is our access road will actually come in pretty close to the south end of the current parking lot or the first parking lot. And the thought process would be, because it's coming in right at the south end of that parking lot, that if there is need for future parking expansion, that could be easily expanded to the south. And really, we've got unlimited room there to take and park and have, walkways and stuff going up along the edge of the parking lot. So we've got a couple swing bridges in here. And that there might be another one that would go right across here. Our park staff and that this fall did brush out this chunk here, kind of on the north end, and they have brushed out some down along here too. So it's pretty much ready for some grading and then some top dressing of some class 5 out there. And again, and that with these volunteer groups, and that we're looking at potentially trying to get this red trail created, and so that that would be the framework or the base of any other smaller trail loops, and that within those areas. Both trails though, and that would have a nice mix of some open walking, some hardwood forest, and some conifer forest, and that so it would be a kind of a blend. One of the big things, and that is proposed in the plan as just being like an informational center, and that is the current cabin out there. The cabin does have a brand new septic to it. The well is not very good at all, and the electric in the building is not great either. But if it was an information center, a tourist center, or maybe it's something that we rent out and groups are able to go out there and have a meeting, or maybe they're able to take and teach a class or a course. That's kind of some of the ideas that have floated around for the use of that. I'd like to stop there and say, what's the committee's thoughts on that?
Information in a learning center type thing? Yeah? Any opposition to that? No? I like that idea, yeah.
It's not a huge building, but it's pretty architectural in that. There's some exposed beams, and it's kind of I think it's an octagon shape, and it's got a big fireplace in the middle, so that kind of limits it a little bit, but kind of some of the ideas that have floated around.
Just know that cabin's gonna be a money pit. It's pretty old and rough.
Yeah. So we did do
If you
some
want to keep
painting
it,
out there.
it's gonna take money invested in it to make it actually usable, so.
Yeah, so it is probably the prettiest spot on the property, really, in that as far as the view, and just because of where it is and that, so. But you will see the existing road here going back to the properties within the park, and that stays the same. So that was one of the challenges that we were trying to navigate with developing this park as well. If you remember, that north access point coming into an entrance station had all of the existing property owners driving through the entrance station, so all of their guests, all of their deliveries, everything. And so by switching it to the south access here, and we did receive a lot of public comment about the gate and that they like that option because it won't allow people to just drive in at any time when our staff are not there. That it'll actually man the hours of the park so that they don't turn into a party spot back here. But as you pull in on the existing road, and that there'd be the gate, so we'd have a lot of signage, and that park traffic must keep right, and then everybody else would be able to simply hang a left and go down to their home. And then we would remove our temporary parking lots down here off from that existing road, and that just so that we're not encouraging any park traffic to go down there because they're not going to have a spot to park. So that's the idea of keeping all of our parking centralized in the middle. Okay.
Yeah, I like that too. I like the separate roads for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was one of the big changes. The cul-de-sac here, the town of St. Joe, had some concern about where that should actually be along Old 35 because they were concerned that the property owner here on the north end between the two 35s might not want to maintain that long of driveway. But we haven't been able to reach them, and they didn't show up to the open house. And so anyway, it's kind of where we're proposing it is right at the corner there. So the gentleman that spoke earlier, and that is right here, right across from where that cul-de-sac would be. One thing to point out, and that the 2 acres here, and that the county purchased from Zappa, that does have a covenant on it that basically only allows that property to be used for single-family housing. And so we took and documented that in the plan just as kind of a reminder for staff, and that, hey, you got to be kind of careful what you're doing in that 2 acres as far as any trail development or anything. So it's just basically a natural space. Okay, so with the overall reduced scope, the park attendance and traffic projections and that we also modified. And so the 2022 plan had 175 parking stalls. Like I said, we're about half of that with the new plan, and that was spread amongst 6 parking lots. Now we're trying to just put it into 1 parking lot. And then before in that, they had a lot of campsites, and so removing all of that. So short story is, in that the previous estimate was 786 vehicle trips per day, and the new one is around 208 vehicle trips per day. And if the property or the Eckert property, let's say the county says, yeah, we just want to develop it into housing, and that the number of houses, and that would have been 23 to 26 houses that could have been developed on the property. And the state says its average is about 10 vehicle trips in that one way, coming or going, in that from a house per day. So that would have been 230 to 260 trips. So in other words, in that the park usage is maybe slightly under or very comparable to is if the property was developed for single-family dwellings. All right. So then the cost estimates. So where did this kind of fall in? And the county board, of course, and that approved the 1.5 million for 2025. And that basically, that's for the new access on new 35, the improvements to old 35, and getting the blacktop or the road into the park. Parking lot being created. If it is able to be paved, we can pave it. If not, and that'll be a future phase, but that was all part. And then that blue trail, and that was trying to be part of that 1.5 million. Then toilet facility, of course, we're gonna have to get electric and well in there. It's gonna be a fair ways in that we're gonna have to run that. So that pushed it roughly 325,000, and that is what we're hoping. Playground area and the benches associated with it, shooting at right around $250,000. So to be ADA, and that they got special, I'll call them wood chips and that, or whatever that needs to be underneath the playground. So they get pretty expensive pretty quick. Picnic shelter and the picnic tables, 125,000. The stairs down to the river and that from that northern access point, and maybe a little pavilion there, roughly 200,000 we're thinking. And then 13 and 14 would be kind of finishing up those main corridor trails, 350,000. Then if we're gonna have some kind of, and it says active sports area, but if we're gonna have some kind of, pickleball court or something like that, threw 150,000 in there for that. The maintenance building, kind of thought to be like a 40 by 60 with maybe a 30 by 30 office, conference room, staff area off to the side. Throwing that out there, about 700,000 with some of the town shops that have been built in the last few years around here. So that's kind of what we were looking at. So that there would not be a fancy entrance building and that, and the idea behind that maintenance building is that it would take care of all of our trails in that area. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I really like the revised plan compared to what we had before in 2022. The only thing, so the existing River Heights Trail that goes back to the existing homes, those homes are just on that left side of where the new pine trees are planted. There's nothing south over by the cabin that is private homes, right?
There is a house, yep. So there's a house right here, Ryan.
It accesses through there. It's just a dirt road that goes back to
Comes down here.
her house.
The road actually comes down like this, and then it splits off, and there's a house right here. It's actually pretty close to the county's property line, and then Gary Zappa has one probably down in here. So there is 2 houses to the south.
That come through there?
Yep.
Okay. So I guess in the future plan, I mean, we don't have to worry about it quite yet, but I like the gated fence for a majority of the park, but when we develop that southwest side, and if we're going to start renting out, the cabin for whatever, what's going to keep people from going down that road and going to the Eckert cabin and the other trails without going in the entrance. That's the only challenge that I see in the future down in that makes that kind of a little more challenging.
Sign. Yeah. There'll be a sign that says not to do that.
Right.
More than likely, and that would be part of a permit process if they're gonna be renting that building, you know, and so at that part of that permit, we could establish a condition on the number of vehicles and that can go back to the cabin. So that would be kind of my initial off-the-cuff answer for that. And that there is good access, or, I mean, none of this is good access down to the water. It's pretty steep and that, but there is 2 decent access points here and that to access the water. The reason why we haven't tried to do a lot more down by the water with this park is, again, with EMS and how are we going to be able to take and get a side-by-side down there and trying to follow the original intent of the bridge funds that we used in that to purchase the property and preserving the bluffs. It's not easy in that, so we're a little bit reluctant about encouraging a lot of access down to the water because everybody can probably get down there, but it's pretty daunting to get back up.
2 questions, Jason. One is part of the rationale for why the county board approved this last year in the budget was concerns about hunting access and risk to neighbors. Will there be any signage or anything that indicates what the rules are, or?
Yeah, so we've currently got signage in that marking the park boundaries, and that to the best that we can, you know, in that, but again, it's like this. I mean, it's very hard to take and be able to line it up like a straight field would be. And that, but, you know, as the park gets developed and used more and that, the county could always try to petition the DNR for the Knowles Nelson funds that we had to acquire the property, that maybe we can only allow bull hunting, or maybe we can limit what is going on out there. And so, like I said, that volunteer group and that wants to do a lot of mountain biking trails too, and that they're talking about, you know, quite a bit of trail work in this area, roughly 4-foot wide trails. And so does the committee have any opposition to us working with that volunteer group and trying to put them in? They would not be necessarily improved, but we are making sure that they understand that while they might be for mountain biking or biking of some sort, they're also going to have to be signed and that to allow hiking and stuff. And so how we would address, you know, the narrowness of the trails and the multi-user groups and that using the trail would be probably trying to sign it and direct people to go a certain way, you know, and that so that you're approaching a biker, and that if you're walking and that you're walking up behind them, and that so that they're not flying by you as a walker, you know, behind. So that's kind of one of the ideas that we've talked about with them to try to allow everybody to use it. But
That was my second question I had to do. Are you working with Wiki? Is that the group?
Wiki, some members of Wiki, yep.
Okay,
So,
good. All right.
yeah, and so they're willing to do a bunch of work out there, and probably not cost us a lot of money. And we're also in parks gonna take and try to put a full-time park seasonal laborer position out here at Eckert for 2025. To, you know, make sure the erosion control is maintained and, you know, do some seeding and do some trail development and brushing and stuff for what we can. So, yep.
Any other comments on the Eckert plan? Yeah, go ahead.
We had talked about, you know, getting this project going for, one of the rationales was for the hunting and what was allowed and what wasn't allowed out there. Now, once we get started on this project, my assumption was that that was going to be limited out there. Is that correct or not?
Well, and that, so with that, it was almost 900,000 that we got to acquire the property. One of the conditions on that grant funding was that we had to allow hunting. And that, but my understanding is that we can petition the DNR and that maybe to only allow certain areas for hunting of the property or to take in, allow certain types, like only bow hunting or archery, so that we're not shooting guns. And so the more trails in that get developed, and the more chance you have of people, going back and forth maybe on a hiking trail or whatever, walking out here, and that I think the odds are going to improve because there's going to be a safety risk in that for the public. So.
I mean, I think also, like, as there's more traffic at the park, there will be less eagerness to hunt it, and people will be more likely to actually. I'm not saying there is poaching, but I'm not saying there's not either. Like as far as like, especially like daylight, nightlight, like when they should be, like what hours they should be hunting. There'd be a little more monitoring of that.
Yeah. And one of the things that we did this year that made a pretty significant change is that we started putting signs. And so like there was a lot of tree stands and stuff that were being put out here. I think we only found 2 or 3 this fall, but we actually laminated a little sign said, hey, this is in violation of Chapter 30 Parks Ordinance, and that will give you a week to remove it. And so we didn't compensate any stands or anything. We did the same things with game cameras out there. And so we had a really good success rate of that about educating people because it's hard to catch them when they're coming and going and that. But so, yeah, I think they're getting more awareness of what the property is and what the allowed uses are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would it be out of the question to close the park during the deer hunting season? Again, that would protect the innocent and allow the hunting that we have to allow. And at least I would say at least during the gun season, maybe not the bow season, but so it's 2 weeks and it's cold. And Ken's gets his over by Woodville. We don't have to worry about that.
No. So the Knowles Stewardship Grant that we used to acquire part of the park property is very specific that all forms of recreation are allowed. Hunting, trapping, any outdoor recreation is required to be allowed, subject to any reasonable restrictions you may place on it. But they have to be reasonable restrictions. So if it's, no hunting on the playground equipment, okay, that seems like a reasonable restriction. But you have to have some reasonable thing, and just closing the whole park during gun season, they wouldn't consider.
Maybe
reasonable.
misunderstood. I meant close down the park to the public for the 2 weeks of hunting season.
Oh, I see.
And then, just to protect the innocent. And then, because it's already November and cold.
Yeah.
I don't hate that idea, to be honest with you. Yeah. And the reasonable restrictions obviously are like within 100 feet of any structure, like there's no hunting allowed there, right? I mean, that's a given.
Yeah. I think it's even might be farther than that even. So
300 for,
yeah,
300, sure.
Yep.
But yeah,
that's an idea.
I don't hate the idea of shutting it down to the general public during
I don't
gun
think
season.
you have to do that in the master plan.
No,
though, but
no.
I mean, and that it's something to consider.
That'd be part of the parks ordinance, probably. Or maybe
Especially if we don't have buildings out there and playground stuff out there. But, as soon as you start having that stuff, then there's risk for damage too, so.
My recommendation would be you'd make it a shotgun-only hunting area, archery or shotgun. Rifles with houses that close, I mean, because I've walked that, there's
Yeah,
almost
it's-
no shot there that,
So it's almost, it's close for comfort. That's not a bad idea either.
You also, as we complete the first phase of this project, and you have your parking lot done, and that center area is the most developed. It would make sense as to leave it open on the north side that will be developed later, and the south side that will be developed later as your kind of hunting areas, and try to close off that center area would make more sense to me.
Okay. Yep.
Should've
So
been-
just so that too, I mean, we went over the cost estimate, because there's nothing out there yet again, and that there's no grants that we can apply for in 2025 for it. But, some of the main grants that may help us out in developing this park would be another Knowles Nelson stewardship grant for like the bathroom and the pavilion. There's several playground grants out there. I can't tell you how good they are. They're usually by the playground manufacturer, and they say, well, we're giving you 50% off. I don't know if you just went there and paid cash, if you'd get it for the same price or not. But then also the recreational trail program grant. So if we have trails that are established and that maintenance or improvements to existing trails rate pretty high with that grant, but development of new trails doesn't. So that's where if we can partner with groups or if we can have our park staff, put in the trails up front, future trail improvements and maintenance, and that we've got a lot of funding options for, or good funding options for. Yep.
Yeah. Jason, in the conversation since I've been on this committee, the number one theme of concerns people have had to do with access on and off Highway 35. And I think you said that Robbie's going to meet with the state, I believe, to
Yeah.
come up with the best proposal. Will you be demonstrating that or sharing that with us at some point?
Yep, and
All right.
that, and so our highway department will have to have an engineered plan and that for that. The highway department engineer and that resigned and that, or he left in that last Friday, and so they're in the process of trying to fill that position. And so, but once that's done, then the goal would be to get that design, and we could definitely bring it back and show you. Both towns also asked for what that design looks like. So, but yeah, so this concept map has been proposed and that to both towns. The only feedback I had from the town of St. Joe was that they wanted the cul-de-sac built to their specs and that, which being that it's in their town, they have the ability for us to do that. And then the town of Hudson had the similar thing about building the town road up to their specs and that, where it's going through the town of Hudson. So those were the only two feedback that we had. So I'm just gonna jump to, and that just, this was the December 17th open house. And there is a very narrow strip of land that we can provide access to up on the very north end. It's very, very small. It's like, I don't know, 0.03 acres in that. So, so that's something that we can easily work out though. Comment number 2 in that, Acker Blufflands Park, now current plan much better. And then the comment that we had heard earlier too, and that about the objection to the south entrance and why keep it and that to the normal one, whereas up on the north end. And again, those reasons are the town of St. Joe and the access to the houses and that back and that in the property without them going through the park entrance, the terrain of that north end, and then the staging area of the traffic and that pushing it much farther south and a lot more road that would have to be disturbing the natural area of that area that we're building that potential red trail. So that's kind of the 3 reasons. So whereas Old 35 will really serve as that potential staging area if there was a huge amount of demand, but with the reduced traffic counts of down into 200 and that it's quite a bit less than the original almost 800.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think also Robbie had mentioned that on the north, if we use the north entrance, we would have to do quite a bit of road work because we come almost parallel with the road instead of coming to the road. And we're on the south side, and it's more of almost a 90-degree turnoff, but on the north it was a follow, so we would have to pull back and make that.
And I know he's got some ideas too for taking and doing some brushing and tree removal on that on the inside of that corner on the south side and that to make it so it's not such a blind intersection there, which we want to do anyway because we've got the Highway 35 Phase 1 trail crossing there as well. But for Phase 2, we're also going to continue that bike trail on the east side of Highway 35 going north. So really that crossing there and that will only be and that for people going and that to the park or the property owners on Old 35 or the ones that are actually within the park that'll be using that crossing. Whereas in the original master plan too, it had them crossing there at the south end of Old 35, and then it had a trail crossing at the north side. So it was really 2 crossings, and everybody had to go through that area in order to make it work. Whereas now, in that, there'll be a lot more safety in that by keeping everything on the east side.
All right. I think that covers.
So if the committee is comfortable with this, then we'd have this scheduled for a public hearing at the February 20th meeting as well.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, consideration of annual park pass fee changes, and I know we recently addressed this, but vendor thing came up, so.
We did.
We're back.
So, well, try again, you know, so we had RFP out for doing some kiosk in the parks that closed on the 15th here. And so just yesterday, and when we have been learning more about these kiosks and that they have basically 3 different options that they're able to do on the screen. We can do a day use pass and charge it for in-state at $10. We can do an out-of-state day use pass and charge it at $15. But then when we do the annual passes, and that there's some complications. And so these kiosk machines will dispense like a little credit card with a mag strip on it, and that can be the annual pass, but it won't dispense 2 different types of it. And so if we keep the out-of-state annual pass fee, and then we almost got to go to the way that they have to mail in their receipt, and then we have to mail them a card, you know, and that would be different. And then we need to take and have 2 different colored cards and that to distinguish between the 2. And so it just ends up to be a lot more administration if we're going to try to do these kiosks. And so we're thinking just going back down to the 30 like we were at the beginning of the year. We haven't sold any passes up to this point at the $35 rate, so there's nobody that's being charged more than what we would be if this goes through. And that's kind of the reason behind it. So we'd kind of jumped the gun in that by changing it. And really, and that then if you're an out-of-stater and you're going to come to the parks more than twice or at least twice, they're going to probably buy an annual pass. Okay.
Any discussion? I suppose you need a motion, huh?
Yeah, I think we do need one. So,
All right. Can you state what the motion is, please?
Make a motion that we make all of the entry fees the $30 rate and don't
for an annual.
don't add any more on for out of state.
For an annual pass.
For annual pass.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
And Supervisor Counter wanted a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. On to 2024. Is there any zoning permit numbers?
Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was kind of unprepared. And I had it typed into the agenda software, and then I didn't add the cover memo. And so that was on me, but I also gave it to you as a handout. And so at the last meeting, I mentioned, you know, that it's easy to take and spotlight the divisions within community development that have a project that they're working on or that they've, you know, maybe got some big numbers to show. But it's harder to take and do that with our zoning or our land use folks. But we had this table, and I thought that was a great opportunity to kind of highlight the work that they're doing, and that on a day-to-day basis. Sanitary applications and that, last year we did 302 applications. That's up to 382, so that's showing strong growth. That's roughly a 26% increase. State sanitary plan reviews, so Kevin Graybow on our staff, and that took it upon himself, and he is now doing reviews on mounds and at-grades. It essentially takes and reduces the wait time to get a sanitary permit in half. So before, the state could take 3 weeks, and then the county might take 2 weeks, and now it's down to that 2.5 week period. And so that also generates some extra revenue because we charge $400 for those plan reviews. So we're actually more expensive in that than the state because they're $250, but that extra $150 is kind of the convenience thing. And as plumbers and installers have seen this working pretty well, we're getting a lot more of them towards the end of the year. And so I think that's going to be a number that might continue to increase. Soil test actually went down a little bit. That is really, and that contributed to the amount of final plats or the major plats that we get because every lot has to be soil tested. And so last year we had 5 major plats, and 2024 we only had 2. Land use permits were almost steady. Conditional use permits were down a little bit, but that's a number that can fluctuate a lot. Certified survey maps, those are minor land divisions, so those are 1 to 4 lots in that were being created. Went from 76 to 98, that's a 29% increase, so very significant. Shows that there's still a lot happening in the county, and the county is seeing a lot of growth. Variances, this is a pretty big key to how good our ordinances are written and how our staff are administering the ordinance. So that's a significant drop from 15 down to 4. And really what I would say that that's attributed to is that our staff are saying, well, you can't build your garage there and that, but if you move it back 10 feet, or if you could build it over here and that, you could build it without a variance. And so that's really the conversations and that are happening, and that's the reason why we're seeing a huge decrease. Rezones and that are right at the same, and waivers and that, those are essentially variances, or what we had as variances in the ordinance in the past as well. So you could really put that 6 on this 15, and it is like a 21 to a 4 drop. And so we no longer do waivers, and so that's why that number went to 0, and then 4 sign permits. So anyway, so overall, and that with the increase in permit numbers and the sanitary plan reviews, and that there was about $81,000 of extra fee revenue generated from permits. So I just wanted to highlight and that their work. They had a good year, and we did a lot of continuing education. Stephanie and Caitlin both got their POUTS inspector, and that, so we've got 4 POUTS inspectors, not including myself, on staff, so we're sitting pretty well.
Looking at this, congratulations on taking on that much of an extra load. But I guess the question I have, manpower-wise, are you in a good position with, as we see this happening and forging ahead?
So the work that the committee is doing and that to take and streamline the processes and streamline the ordinances, and that is significantly helping, and that our staff, and I've asked all of our staff numerous times, you know, how do you feel like your workload is? Are you overwhelmed? And that, and all of them say that it's a manageable workload. So
I did want to officially chime in though and say some of the statistics, you can see improvements in, especially like the variances and stuff, and that's attributed to Jason's leadership in the department and the customer service focus that he has for the department that they've embraced. And you can statistically see the benefits of that. So good job, Jason.
So
Yes, thank you, Jason.
yeah,
For sure.
all right.
Any other questions or thoughts on zoning permit numbers? No. It's pretty cool. Actually, it is really cool. Financial report.
Again, budgets are all pretty good. We talked a couple months ago about the 6310 cost center and that were in the red on. But just going to back up, and that hazardous waste, we use some of this 21,000 and that for our hazardous waste voucher program for next year. And fairgrounds and extension are all fine. You'll see a big number here and that for land and water conservation, 243,000. That's because of this big number here and that with the cost share that is going out, that 406,000. We do have roughly 267,000 coming in and that from DATCAP and SEG and DNR. Unfortunately, and that we try to take and, apply like middle of the year and that. We did that for the first time this year. However, in that getting these producers, believe it or not, you'd think they'd want to check in that to submit their paperwork and their information, but it kind of comes in all at the fall. And then we have to submit for reimbursement. And so that number and that, even with the payrolls and stuff, should just squeak by black by the time we get putting everything back on 2024. So, but one thing you can see here, as far as Tim's team and his work, cost sharing and that back in 2022, just 2 years ago, 171,000, 223,000 in 2023, 406,000. So that's almost a 100% increase or doubled in that the amount of cost share projects. So that shows you that how much stuff that they are really doing in that with waterways, cover crops, you name it, manure pit closures, well seals and that. So Tim just brought it up to me today that they closed one well as a 6-inch well, 110 feet deep. Probably normally that's, 20, 30 bags of bentonite to take and seal it, 178 bags of bentonite to seal it. So had some major voids going someplace. So anyway, so that they do a lot of good work, and that is all reflected in this number here. And zoning, and that is positive 221,000 and that, but by the time payrolls come out of there, it should be very close to that 80 to 90,000 in the black, which is about the increase in that we've seen in the permit revenue. So, and but this 80,000 for the 6310 cost center, we've got about 15,000 of that coming back, but it's still going to be red. So we just ain't going to be able to pull it back out. That's what I've got.
Any
Any
questions?
questions?
Any questions on the budget? No. Alrighty. Do we have a request for future agenda items?
I have one. After listening to a lot of public comment on the manure digester, several of our ag producers were referencing working on something in a water quality thing in 2017. So I asked Jason to send it to me, and there are actually 2 documents. One is a report on protection of surface and groundwater quality in St. Croix County, and the other is prioritized recommendations. I'd like to see us spend some time on this at the next agenda, because several of these things we're doing, but a lot of them we're not. And I think it would be helpful for us to use that as a baseline for discussion.
The next agenda is pretty loaded, but we could probably do it in March.
If it happens in March, that would be fine with me.
March would be really good, Supervisor Rice, because I plan on having that agenda more on land and water again. We've got some new programs in that, so Tim will be here for that meeting, and potentially also Patty with our water quality specialist and that to talk about their new programs. So March would be good, and that we just got a lot of big hearings in that in February.
Yeah. Sure.
I would like to see a report from EDC. We, since she started, she's been there for a little over a year. I don't think she's talked to us yet, so.
Yeah, that's a good one, for sure.
I especially would like to get a report back from her on what the economic development is projections are, and what I know that there are some projects that are getting turned away. I would like to see some numbers to that.
Okay. Supervisor Connor?
You got 2 potential ones, but one is concerns we had brought up from some people that came up during public comment concerning FSA representative, and I have the utmost respect for our current, but looking at that, I think because of a lot of the things that are going on right now, especially with our water issues and the things that we're talking about, I think having somebody that's coming from that background is really important to us right now to share and be able to share their comments. The other is we had received a letter from Land and Water, and whether we meet with them or not, they requested an audience with us, but again, after talking, I kind of strongly support a lot of what Jason's comments were to me with that, but it would be something, do we want to discuss or talk to them about the issues that Land and Water representative was bringing forward to us, or do we just leave that internal with Jason? Being that the letters, unfortunately, they sent us all letters, Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another one I would like an update on, and I don't know if we've had any movement on, is any other issues with Wildwood Trail?
Yeah, I mean, we can always put it on the agenda for an update, and if there's not much to tell you, then there won't be much to tell you.
Anything else? No. All right. Do we have
Can I
any?
just ask one clarification?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So Supervisor Counter, would you like me to reach out to the Wisconsin Land and Water Association so that they come and present at the meeting? Is that what you're asking?
I just want to have a response channel to them, either if you can handle it, no, not necessarily, but if that's something where they really have to talk to us directly, but I'll kind of, I would leave it to your discretion, one way or the other. So if they're requiring it, or, getting,
Yeah.
I'll
You know what I'm saying.
I'll work with Jason on that one. See, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a gray area. I'm trying to think. So you guys set policy, so is the membership with an organization a policy decision?
Because it's a.
Or is it an operational issue?
Because it's an expense,
A little bit of a toss-up there. I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
really decide right off the top of my
Right.
head, but
Yeah, I mean, I have my opinion, and Jason knows what my opinion is, but whether they come here or not, we'll talk and figure something out.
we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supervisor Shirley, would you be okay with St. Croix Economic Development Corporation in March too? Okay. And I think in that we'll have more on the FSA representative and that, because I believe that's on the admin committee meeting next week on that already to kind of address that. So, so that may or may not be on the agenda. That's all I'm bringing it up because it may be already addressed by the time we're doing February meeting, so. Okay.
Any announcements?
I've got just a few.
Sure.
On that, so.
Absolutely.
All right, well, Monday, we had good news in that from the Amish community. Abby Coffin and I stopped out to Harvey Gingrich's property. He operates a general store. And we sat down with him. We helped him fill out a conditional use permit application and that for what they were doing out there. They paid the after the fact fee and that for the permit and everything. And so in other words, that's a very solid attempt to take and try to comply with the county regulations. They said that they would apply for more permits and more conditional uses and that for like their sawmills and stuff. And that if Chapter 15 gets amended and that, so that there's at least a route in that for them to do. So they said that there was actually some miscommunication amongst them as a community and amongst what we were doing. And so, but anyway, it was a very productive meeting and that on Monday. And so, hopefully that can keep on moving forward and, we're able to get some compliance. So, February 20th, Land and Water is doing a producer-led meeting down at the Kinney Town Hall. That's kind of a project kickoff on the Kinney-Kinnick watershed grant and that we got to try to get producers and property owners. We're working with the Kinney Land Trust and that to get interest in that meeting. On another meeting on March 6th, our land use and zoning folks are holding a sanitary training, bringing in 3 outside speakers and that to do a training on pouts over at Baldwin. So that's our annual spring training and that there is 3 continuing ed credits for that. We've already got 10 people signed up. It'll probably get up into the 40s by the time we're there. And Max Erickson, and that was our land use planner. His last day was last Friday. He got a very good offer with the city of Cottage Grove, and it was only 10 miles away from his house. And that that posted today, and that for his replacement. And chapter 15, and that I sent that out to the committee with the changes from last Thursday. And I will be working on a petition and getting that filed and the proper notices out. We've already sent that draft out to the town clerks and the town chairs via email, and that to try to give them as much time if they've got any comment. So, but most of those changes have all been went through with the towns at the Wisconsin Towns Association in October. So there shouldn't be anything really big red flags for them. So that's what I've got, Mr. Chair.
Announcement, all right.
Announcement. On Monday, the 27th at 6 p.m., Tom Tiffany is going to be doing a listening session, maybe not specifically on our solar issue, but more geared towards that. That is at the New Richmond Middle School.
All right. You got one?
Also, on Tuesday of next week, 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., I think it is, you can zoom in on the Rail Coalition meeting that is taking place in Eau Claire, I believe. But they do have it on Zoom, and you should have all got a notice. Mine came in on spam, and I had to unlock it. So, but check that out. It might be something to keep you in the loop on what's going on with that.
All right. Seeing nothing else, the date of the next meeting, which will be a lengthy one. We have a lot of stuff on there. February 20th at 5 p.m. right here. All right, thanks. This meeting is adjourned.
Jason, question.